The following is a content and trigger warning. In this episode, we will be speaking about domestic and intimate partner violence and various factors that contribute to that, such as sexual violence and sexual assault. If you feel that it is too distressing and you are unable to listen for the sake of your mental health, we ask you to skip this episode and join us next week. Also, if you or someone you love is dealing with domestic violence, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-799-7233 or text START to 88788. Good evening, morning, and everywhere in between to our ladies and gentlemen and our non-binary babies out there, because there are some. And welcome to Live from the CRJ. I am Lawrence Weber, the project assistant, and I also have the project coordinator here, Boss Lady. Go ahead.
Tia Suggs.
And we actually have a very special guest today. This past week, we went ahead and did the domestic violence conference here on campus in Georges, and we have actually one of the participants of the conference, Miss Josie Ashton here. Hi, how are you?
Hi, super excited to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so and I think I did put a recording in front of this, just giving everyone a heads up. This episode, we will be speaking at length about domestic violence and intimate partner violence. So again, I do want to put that as a content warning to anybody who is listening. If you do have trauma, this may not be the episode you want to start on. If that is the case, no harm, no foul. We will see you guys next week. But we definitely need to speak about this because it is definitely important in not only the country but the world. Unfortunately, we still have this problem. So if you could go ahead, Ms. Josie, and kind of introduce us to you and introduce us to a little bit about your work.
Okay. So again, thank you for the opportunity to have me here. And yes, like you gave that disclaimer. It's, some people may be triggered by the stories, but I think that if anybody that is listening, if you can endure the discomfort and just connect with your body and allow yourself to be uncomfortable and you can tolerate it, stay. If you cannot tolerate it, then, maybe you can find somebody that can help you listen through it. But it is an important discussion. And it is actually, in my case, a discussion of empowerment, because today I am a mental health therapist. I am an activist. I advocate for victims of trauma, and victim advocacy is what I've done my whole life. And that had to do a lot with my own trauma that I experienced as a child and as a teenager.
Gotcha. Now, when we first met you at the conference, it was a sight to behold because you were in a full wedding gown. Your head was shrouded. You were wearing a pair of glasses. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So yes, it's a really impactful visual, and it's something that I've been doing since 2001. I was attending Florida International University in Miami, House of the Panthers, and I heard about the story of Gladys Ricard, and that was a woman that was murdered in 1999 by her jealous ex-boyfriend. She was getting ready to marry somebody that she had met a few months ago, and he waited until the day of the wedding. He waited until the entire family was there, and then he entered the house while she was fully dressed and shot her 5 times. So as a criminal justice student, I was paying attention to it, and I had also been working with victims of domestic violence for 7 years, in addition to my own trauma with domestic violence. So that case really impacted me, and I really felt the presence of my creator telling me, put on your wedding gown, give the media something as radical as the murder itself, and use this opportunity to raise awareness. And that is exactly what I did. I had an amazing professor, as well as the Alpha Phi Sigma Criminal Justice Honor Society, who backed me up. And I went to her house, walked to the church where she was to be married the first day. It was about 26 and 30 miles. And then I kept walking down south to Florida International University, North Campus in North Miami Beach.
Okay. Now, you said you've been doing this work since 2001. That is 22 years of experiencing that. Can you give me a difference as to what happened? Because you created something called the Bride's Walk. Right. Can you give me like the difference of what happened in 2001 and 2003 and now 2023, where I feel like now we're kind of hyper focused on more of these issues than we were 22 years ago.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And yeah, there's a big difference. Back then, I was so angry. I was so bothered by the fact that a lot of people were blaming the victim. A lot of people were saying that she brought it upon herself, that she was two-timing him, which during the trial, it came out that she wasn't. Mm-hmm. The walk started before the trial, and one of my main focus was to make sure that the potential jurors were educated about what domestic violence was and what it wasn't. A lot of people, unfortunately, even today, don't have a good visual of what domestic violence is like. For example, I didn't pick my abuser. My abuser chose me because I was a vulnerable teenager. Mm-hmm. When I was 9 years old, I didn't pick up my abuser either. I didn't even pick up my parents. And my mom used to do a lot of drugs and used to have really strange people coming to the house. And as a result, I was sexually abused again. So, it was important for me at that point when I saw the case of Gladys Ricard and I started just seeing my life unfold and how in my family we didn't even talk about it. There was no discussion about my sexual abuse, my physical abuse, my child neglect. Nobody talked about it. Grandma, auntie, uncle. It's like I didn't even exist. It's like my trauma did not exist. Mm-hmm. And so I see the images of Gladys Ricard all over the news. It made international news because the entire murder was caught on tape. I couldn't understand how these images were going worldwide, and people were still blaming her. They were making excuses. And at that moment, I just felt very righteously offended, right? I was very upset. And, mm-hmm. The only thing that I felt that gave me power was to put on that wedding gown. I contacted the family. I contacted the prosecutor. I contacted the fiance that was waiting for her at the church, and I asked for permission, and everybody gave me permission, and then the family walked with me the very first day. So the movement turned into a national and international movement because now we have marches in different states. We have marches in Washington, D.C. We have celebrities joining us. We go to Congress every year. So this past 22 years, it has turned into a movement. Something that I did by myself now has become something that thousands of people do. But I think the breaking point for me as a survivor came last December, where I had to really sit with myself as an older woman, as an older mom, as a single woman, and see where I kind of did an audit on my trauma wounds. To find myself where I was. And I felt that I was still in a place that was not authentic to me. I was still hiding behind the activism, hiding behind my schooling, hiding behind the family, hiding behind the busyness of life. And I still felt very uncomfortable within myself. One of the things that happen when you experience trauma is that, especially as a child, you grow up and you make decisions that you're not very proud of, right? Those decisions may be promiscuity, maybe alcoholism, whatever it is, right? We use different techniques to cope. And it comes to a point where it's like, okay, what have I been doing all this time? Like, I have the degree and I had all these things, the house, the car, the family. For all intents and purposes, I'm successful, right? So why is it that I feel so shallow and so empty? And besides all that, why is it that I see that we are not making progress on the healing piece, especially within the criminal justice system? We talk about sanctions. We talk about batterers intervention program, which is the same thing that we had 30 years ago. But yet we see minorities, Black, Hispanics, going to jail and going to prison for domestic violence. But there is not a system of healing where we can not only restore, because I don't think that the abusers have ever been restored. I think that a lot of the abusers are suffering the same trauma wounds that I may have had. It's just that we express our pain differently. Gender has an impact. Race has an impact. So I think for 2023, my whole thing was like, oh no, we really got to do a little bit better than this. I didn't feel that I had really literally started my healing process. I was processing healing during those 22 years, but this time it's a walk more of empowerment, change, and healing for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's actually get to that. Because you said that earlier, what is domestic violence, and how does in I guess the legal standpoint, does it different? Because I usually you say them separately, domestic violence and intimate partner violence, because they are two different things. Domestic can mean your mom, your dad, your brother, your cousin,
right?
Intimate partner is intimate partner. And so let's actually give them the kind of, I guess, solid definition as to what domestic violence is.
And, I am from South Florida, and I've been traveling south, right? So this walk is 2,200 miles going west, starting in Atlanta to Los Angeles. And so I'm going through different states, right? And the law is different in every state, okay? So I don't want to get into the legal aspect of it. But for me, in this state of Florida, we're talking about certain elements and certain type of behaviors or crimes. It could be stalking, sexual assault, sexual violence, physical assault, physical violence, assault with a deadly weapon. So it's the same crime, basically, that would be illegal with somebody that I don't know, except that the relationship potentially enhances the sentence, right?
Gotcha.
So where if I were to slap a stranger, would be one thing, I may get bond right away. But if I slap my sister or my mom or my boyfriend, I may have to stay in jail 24 hours. Because the crime is, the way that the law looks at it is such an intimate relationship, and it can be so many feelings and passion and accessibility, right? I know where they live. I know where they are. I know where they go to school. So all of that make the situation a whole lot more volatile. So because of that, we have to intervene with it completely different.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think what I want to kind of get into and deeper, and I'm sorry, I don't want to be hogging. I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into what makes essentially sort of that pyramid of domestic violence, because I think for a lot of people who they have a mindset of what domestic violence is. Their mindset is probably like Ike and Tina Turner, or they see what they see on television. You know what I mean? Right. But for a lot of people, they don't know the full scope of it. They just they think of scenes of somebody being slapped around or something. But I feel like it goes much, much deeper than that.
It does. And, we have this new syndrome that we call this narcissistic abuse. And I must be completely transparent with you right now. I do not agree with that term, and I'm going to tell you why. Narcissism comes from the law, narcissistic personality disorder. You are born that way. Mm-hmm. There's nothing you can do about it. You are born and oftentimes diagnosed that way, mm-hmm. right? And mental health, you can't compare mental health issues with domestic violence issues. So for you to tell me that somebody that is, like you said, the pyramid, controlling, financially controlling, that humiliates me, that slash my tires, that call my job and tell them that I'm smoking weed so I get fired or get tested, that, undermines me in front of my kids, all that stuff. Oh, he's narcissistic. No, he's not narcissistic. He's an abuser. Mm-hmm. Okay? He is an abuser. And he learned that behavior, or she learned that behavior, because please, let's talk about females. Mm-hmm. Okay? We have a lot of females under the radar. And I want to get into that separately, but the whole narcissistic piece looks very different when it's a personality disorder and this person is born that way. I know it can be traumatic. It's no different than me having a son that has schizophrenia, mm-hmm. right? He's going to do things that can be very scary to me, but he has schizophrenia. There is no intent or malice, right? It's a mental disorder, even though they can do a lot of damage, but it's a mental disorder.
Gotcha.
Mental illness. So back to the abuse, we're talking about spiritual abuse, humiliating your spirituality. You're saying, well, aren't you a Christian or aren't you a Muslim? Why are you acting that way, right? And using that to humiliate you. So there are many different ways. Like you said, it could be a cousin, it could be a sister, it could be a grandmother. If they live in the same house as a family unit, once that trust is broken, once that intimidation starts and manipulation and the hostility and the stalking and the I'm going to knock on grandma's door 50 times until grandma comes out and give me the cash so I can buy my weed or I can buy my crack. Mm-hmm. Those are some of the cases that I've had. Now, he doesn't have a mental illness or she didn't have a mental illness. They just wanted drugs. They have an addiction. Mm-hmm. But still, grandma is older and fragile, and now grandma's nerves are out of control because she's being put under duress by this grandchild that she has in the home.
Absolutely. Tina.
I was wondering also, from our panel we had on Saturday, they talked about different signs of abusers.
Right.
Could you tell us what signs that you find distinguish an abuser?
There are many signs, and there are many reasons why those signs come out, right? It could be, hey, you have a beautiful voice. I can get you signed. And, now I become your hero. Now I become your source of making it in life. Mm-hmm. And so I don't like to talk about all these red flags because they can look so different in different relationships. But yeah, if the person starts controlling you, or taking you away for your friends. But even that, your friends could be horrible, and this person could really want to help you, right? Mm-hmm. So it's one of those case by case. But I tell you, for me, the biggest red flag is my instinct. Mm-hmm. And even right now, as a single woman, I have run into situations and potential partners that I'm like, whoa, whoa, I have to get away from this person. This person has some real serious healing to do, and although I'm a trauma expert and I'm a mental health counselor, he's not my job. Yeah. I cannot heal somebody that is my partner. He needs to get professional help, or she needs to get professional help. And I think that's the part that when we have unhealed wounds, mm-hmm. we want to become other people's savior. We know how much it hurt. Right. We know how humiliating it is and how painful it is. So instead of us taking care of us, we find somebody in pain and we try to work with them. Mm-hmm. And in the end, we can end up hurting each other, or we can end up being hurt. Mm-hmm. And so, again, if we go to the red flags, the financial manipulation, the cursing, the carrying on, the hurting you. But, I've seen cases where there's been absolutely no red signs, no red flags, and violence still happens. So it's that instinct that is really important. But in order for you to listen to that voice, your mind needs to be connected to your body and your soul, right? Mm-hmm. And we are often disconnected when we're not healed. We don't pay attention to our body. We disconnect. And because of that, we don't follow our instinct, our gut instinct, because our stomach is connected to our brain. So that disconnect can really cause a lack of discernment that can be very impactful.
Now, here is what I found interesting, because you speak a lot about your healing process. And we all know healing trauma can be quite difficult.
Yep.
From personal personal experience too.
We all have it, yeah.
Can you unpack a little bit about how that journey has been for you? Because, like I said, you said you had that moment where you were like, okay, I'm still not working. I'm holding this in. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about how you unpacked that?
That was a moment. It was September of 2022, and I was doing the most, like usual, on my job. That's how I'm described. Oh, you're always doing the most. And I was, I'll be running down the courthouse. I'll be bringing water, tissue, homicide case, and running around with my clients, survivors. But in this occasion, I got a call from our clinical director, and I was told that my license to practice mental health had expired. And I was doing mental health, not because I was hired as a mental health counselor, but because the person that I was covering for, because I speak fluent Spanish, she had an illness. And so I'm like, I'll do it. I volunteer because, I can do it all, right? That's what we do. We're caretakers. We want to do it all. We want to rescue people in order to ignore our pain. That's what I did for 30 years. That's what I did. And so I had to own it. So when they told me that my license had expired, which it was true, I wasn't paying attention. I was doing the most. So I wasn't paying attention to the thing that was in front of me. I was engulfed with shame. That was the first thing. I'm not good enough. Who do I think I am? Look at this license. How can I let it expire? Look at you. You see, you should have never had that master's degree anyway. All of those negative thoughts came to my mind. My entire identity collapsed. Not my professional identity. My entire identity. I had really created my life upon my profession and my advocacy and my activism. That was who I was. When I started working with a life coach, because I already had a therapist, but in order to unpack that for me, I hired a life coach, and he's like, who are you? I'm a mom. I'm an advocate. I'm a therapist. No, that's what you do. Who are you? I'm a mental health counselor, and, I have friends, and no, that's what you do. And I was really upset. To not be able to answer that question, I was very upset because it is such a simple question, but I couldn't go within myself. I couldn't go within my own mind and body and soul and feel whole to answer that question in a way that could integrate all the aspects of who I was. And so that's when it happened. And then December 1st, my license was reinstated. It's just funny. I have to believe in my maker because, we all have our spiritual guides, but I'm like, what are the odds that I'm going through all of this? And, I call a couple of lawyers because, of course, I was practicing mental health and my license was expired. So I could have been fired. I could have been taken off the Board of Health. Many things could have happened. But for my sake, the law in the state of Florida says, as long as you work for the government or a nonprofit organization dealing with survivors, you don't need to have an active license. So I did nothing wrong, per se, but I was indicted. I was indicted by myself, by my own narrative, right? I was devastated And I felt that my life had crumbled because a piece of paper had expired, when in reality, I didn't even need it. So it got restated, but that moment proved to me that I had a lot of work to do with me. And so that's when it all started. I got some life coaching. In January 10th of this year, I went to a 3-week clinic in Pennsylvania, and that was a trauma residential program. I didn't even know I could do that. We don't talk about that. They tell you, oh, you have to go into residential if you're psychotic or if you have substance abuse. No. Veterans go into residential program all the time for post-traumatic stress disorder. And I could go too. And I decided to leave my family and to go for 3 weeks and unpack all that trauma. And there was a lot of crying. There was a lot of screaming. There was a lot of feeling. We don't want to feel the pain, and that's why we shy away from healing. You know, most people that have diabetes, that lose a limb, lose it because the nerve doesn't feel anything, and they don't know how deep the infection is until it's time to amputate. And that is the best example I can give you about our emotional wounds. How we numb is going to interfere with our healing. So I had to stop numbing. I had to remove myself from the cooking, the cleaning, the washing, the working, the driving, the picking up the kids, and go to work on myself for 3 weeks.
It's amazing.
That it really is. And
I actually, when I was in high school, I went to an all-girl Catholic high school, but we did a retreat for like a day, and it was all the junior girls, and we went to this cabin. And it was like fun and games at first, but at night it got serious. And they turned the lights off, they put candles, and we had a very open discussion. And they had us separated, but like each room you would go and talk to a senior and they would tell you all these things. But during one of those open sessions, one girl had opened up about being abused as a child too by her stepbrother.
Right.
And it was amazing how, to me, because I would have never thought to say that out loud to my classmates, let alone, you know, we're just at this retreat thing. I had no idea it was going to get that deep.
That deep, right?
You know, it was just how brave she was to open up about it, and how once she opened that door, more girls opened up. And then it's this shock factor that, wow, this really happens to people you don't even expect it from.
That's right. It looked just like me, like you, like him. And so what you're saying is exactly what I'm trying to create. And I even mentioned it on Saturday. That's what community looks like. Mm-hmm. When you find your community, when you find your village, when you find your structure, you know how many heterosexual men are suffering in silence because the same patriarchal system that abuses us as women also put pressure on them not to talk about sexual abuse, not to talk about physical abuse. Older women abusing our young boys, okay? And forget the binary. I don't even know how they do it. I mean, but we need to start creating these communities where we can feel safe enough to heal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, maybe a year or so back, a gentleman by the name of Larry Ulrich, I actually went to him, because we were doing, the Take the Night Back that we do here, every year. And he created a film called Battered. And it was literally a film about a man who was in a relationship with a woman who was being physically abused. And he had someone at the door, had a police officer at the door, and he was deathly afraid of saying anything.
Of course.
And like I said, unfortunately for a lot of men when dealing with not only physical trauma, domestic trauma, intimate partner trauma, they do feel like, okay, people gonna look at me like I'm this or I'm that, and they don't say anything. They literally don't say anything, and they suffer in silence, or they use it as bravado. The one thing that comes to my mind
bravado.
is the singer Chris Brown, who I think opened up and basically said that he lost his virginity at like 8 years old, and everybody at that moment was like, that's not how that works.
No.
Yeah.
That's not how that works at all.
It's not cute. It's not funny. It's not safe.
Like what?
That's like giving popcorn to a 6-month-old. You don't give popcorn to a 6-month-old baby. Mm-hmm. They're gonna choke.
Yeah.
And like I said, and all I'm thinking of is like, wow.
Yeah.
And it's really something
This is us.
that
Yeah.
they want
This
to
is
brag
us.
on.
Yep.
It's like a bragging thing. Like I'm 26, so I have friends who've talked about it. Like, oh, I lost my virginity at 10
But
by a
watch-
16-year-old girl, and I'm like, no.
But
That's
then
not how
watch
that
their
works.
behavior.
Yeah.
Watch their behavior as they continue to grow, right? Because they don't take themselves serious. The level of maturity, because for anybody to be bragging about that, I was sexually abused at 9 years old, and it's one of the worst experiences of my life. I remember like it happened today.
Yeah.
I don't forget. We don't forget. Children don't forget. And then there is this book that says the body keeps the score. Our body remembers that. It stays in our veins, in our muscles. That's why yoga is one of the best exercise for trauma, because you open your body to release some of that toxicity. But, it is not something I brag about or that has made me a better lover or, more in tune with my body. In the contrary, again, if we look at the gender differences, and it breaks my heart, it's not even gender difference. I think it's societal norms.
Absolutely.
And the expectations that we put on our men.
Yeah.
It's not fair, because they suffer just like we suffer. For my internship, I had to do some work in homeless shelters, and I had some guys with me weeping. It was the first time that they talked about how this woman did these things to them, 8, 7 years old, and she will give him drugs. And of course he's homeless now. He doesn't have a life. But he has all his faculties. He just have no self-worth, because nobody explained to him what self-worth looks like in a man. Empowerment, right? Because let me tell you, there were times where I was going way the wrong way, and I had to own my pain, and I had to get rid of the shame. And I'm talking at a young age, at 17, going to court and telling the judge, please don't let my mom out. She needs to go into a drug program. People that use my body, and me having to discuss it. And, but it takes time. But there is one thing I think that saved me, and it comes from my church. And the church says, I don't know if it's the church or the Bible, I don't remember, but all I know is that this I always use in my mind to make sure that I could express myself. It's like, when the devil has something on you, it's like he's always going to have that on you. So anytime, like if I will mess up, if I will cheat, okay, because I've cheated and I've done many things, I will own it. I will own it with as much integrity as I could, because I didn't want anybody to have anything on me. Yes, I did that. Yes, I broke that. Yes, I stole that. You know what I mean? And that gave me the strength to not live in silence. But I had to start owning myself first before I could start talking about the other things that were being done to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've always heard that whole own your truth, so your truth can't be used against you.
Yes.
My grandma always said, don't do anything you're ashamed of.
There you go.
And guess what? We will.
And like I said, here's the one thing that, especially we were talking about this past Saturday, if you feel you are in that situation, we were talking about getting out. Mm-hmm. And like I said, when the segment that you were a part of, and you and another woman who shared her story, which I had to step out of the room
It was
for.
tough.
I had to step out of the room for, because that was extreme.
Yeah.
It was. But we were talking about getting out and the ways of getting out, because unfortunately there are some people who stay for the children, who stay because they don't have their own finances, who stay because they'll be shamed in the church to stay for this, who will stay for that. How do we get to those people and tell them, hey, there's ways to leave?
Mm-hmm. For me, the most effective way is showing the community that we're committed. In New York City, in one of the areas where they have the highest rate of domestic violence, the Bronx, Harlem, Washington Heights, that's where we do the march every single year. And we have hundreds of people walking in black or in wedding gowns or in white. And we go through those neighborhoods. And, this year we had, 2 years ago, we had two new, unfortunately, victims that lost their lives. So we stop at the crime scene and we have a moment of silence. The community knows that the programs are there because they come, and they have been coming since 2001. Mm-hmm. And so they know we're committed. Once they know that they have a village, they can be more strategic in trusting the village and trusting the programs. Listen, the federal government has $6.9 billion through the Violence Against Women Act. Mm-hmm. This is not a money problem, okay? We have the money. We have the resources. We have the therapists and the victim advocates. What we don't have is the knowledge. The community often doesn't know that we have $6.9 billion and that the programs are there for them. And what we don't have oftentimes is the confidence to go out and share our burden with a government employee or with a nonprofit employee and expect to be held and treated with dignity and respect.
Absolutely.
And I know that because I've been doing this for 29 years, and clients will come to me scared, and then they'll be like, wow, I never knew that it was not easy, because it's never easy, but I didn't know I could get all this help. I'm like, I know. And guess what? I'm not doing you a favor. This is your right in the state of Florida. You have constitutional right if you are a victim of any crime, any violent crime. So it's important for us to create a community in which we develop that sense of responsibility for our sisters and our brothers. Mm-hmm. That for me is key.
Yeah, we had actually went to the Louisiana State Prison last year to visit the women in the corrections, and we met 8 women. Out of the 8, only 1 was not there due to domestic violence that we spoke with.
Wow.
And hearing all their stories, like I met one woman, she was a college graduate,
right,
and got a degree in social work, and was abused because she didn't want to go back home. And then one woman, she was like, I had everything. I had my parents. They gave me everything I wanted, but I just met this man, and I thought it was love, and, he set her up and all this stuff. And just hearing how many women, and just going to the prison and seeing how many women, and even on the shows, there's a lot of TV around it, but their biggest message was they don't feel heard about their stories.
Right.
And just the idea of like, now women it would be like considered self-defense now. So there's women who are still in prison before that was changed. So it's just that difficult idea of like, how can we move past from the past,
Right. And you know what? Funny you say that, move from the past, because I've gone through Selma, gone through Alabama, right? And I've done my history tour, kind of. And let me tell you something. It's different, okay? It's different. And I see all these homes that have survived, beautiful homes, but they're missing windows or doors, or they're dirty. So surviving is not enough, right? We have to heal. We have to rebuild. We have to get the new roof and the new windows. Surviving is not enough. We need to strive to thrive, right? But I also think about the work of Dr. Martin Luther King, and did we really finish his work? Did we really continue the work? Because yes, he achieved his goal at the expense of his own life, because he knew that he was in danger, but we can always integrate the races, but are we integrating the pain? Are we setting up a system in which all those generations can heal that pain so we don't keep passing it on? Because we talk about generational trauma, but how can we not have generational trauma?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How can we not? Stop talking about that. Just create a system that can heal. We didn't do that.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King did his best. And yes, now we have integration, but the pain and the wounds and the trauma continue to be there. We have to do better. We have to do better, because if I hurt, I will hurt you. But if I can heal like I'm doing now, I can bring healing to more people. And that's my honest desire.
And absolutely. I keep on hearing these various people in the back of my head. It's like, make sure you heal. Like, if you're cut, make sure you heal yourself so you don't bleed on anybody else.
Exactly.
Do you feel that there are different ways to come to bring awareness to this issue when it comes to different groups? Like I said, we are all three of us are in here. We are Hispanic, Latino, Afro-Latin, African American, and I just want to, because we do see it a lot, and the one thing that I can say about, like I said, Black families and Latino families is that we don't talk about a lot of stuff.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
We don't talk about a lot of stuff. And this is something that needs to be spoken about, right? Because it's at the detriment of people's actual lives. And like I said, sometimes we got to talk about it. How do we essentially open up? How do we get past that, like, first really difficult hurdle? Right. Of, okay, we need to get this out in the open.
Right. So I love that question. And it's funny because when I do my interview techniques, I'm like, I'm never going to say I love that question because I love every question, right? But I really love this question because it triggered something in my mind about cultural identity, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's why I have an issue answering questions like, what are the red flags and how can you escape? Which I'm sure I didn't answer, but I'm going to get into that a little bit more, because these are the regular questions that we ask, but we don't explain what does that look like. Mm-hmm. What does that look like, right? So I will tell you, well, you know, we have to meet the people where they're at. What does that mean? Meet them where they're at. Well, in Washington Heights, when Gladys Ricard was killed, Gladys Ricard was part of that community. She was killing her wedding gown. So you know what we did? We put on wedding gowns. Everybody in the community knew what we were doing. People came with pots and pans. And there were, I mean, the trauma that we were leaving on the concrete, on the asphalt, was amazing. We will get to the final destination just overwhelmed with emotions, because we went through those 7 miles just, you know, completely empowered and feeling safe and expressing ourselves no matter how ugly we cried, right? So that could be African community or Hispanic. That's what we do in New York City. But here in New Orleans, you know how much I've been dying to have like a big band? I told you before we started the interview. Yeah. What would it be like to have not a festival, but a procession in an area where it's empowering to you guys, and have an event that meets your cultural needs, that will attract people? And we're not just saying, oh, well, you know, if you get a black eye or busted lip, that's not domestic violence. It is domestic violence, but that's not, you know.
It's not the whole thing.
That's not the whole thing. Let's get out of this mentality. Listen, trauma kills, period.
Absolutely.
How you get the trauma, it will kill you if you don't heal, okay? Penn State University. Director of the psychology department at Penn State University. He lived in New York. He was hired from New York. He left the family in New York and traveled to Pennsylvania to take his new position. Within a few months, without his wife moving and the kids, he jumped off that building. He literally jumped off that building. I don't know what was in his mind, in his heart, okay? Feelings of failure, maybe trauma triggers. I don't know, but the bottom line is that we cannot walk around like everything is okay. The makeup, the hair, the nails, the suit, we can't hide behind it. We need to be more authentic with our pain. So it's important to be cultural specific, and you cannot give me, like I said on Saturday, the Saturday morning Nike run, you know, where we're going to collect money for the local shelter or buy toiletries. That's not going to impact me in any way. I'm not going to run on Brooks and Nike stuff. That's not what I'm about, okay? I'm in my house being beaten up. I don't have money for the daycare next week. What you're doing doesn't impact me.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Talk to me about resources. Yeah. And then when I see you committed, doing the outrageous campaign, whether it's wearing a wedding gown or for animal rights, what do? They take out their clothes in New York City. I know those people are committed, right? They're committed to animal rights. Yeah. And you know what? I'm committed to domestic violence. So as a community, we need to show that passion. We need to show that commitment by our acts.
Absolutely.
Okay? By our acts.
So, I'm sorry.
I just had a question about what would your advice be for a friend of someone who is involved in a domestic violence situation, like who is trying to be a friend, but is also tackling this whole abuse from a distance, in a sense? Like,
be afraid. Be very afraid. Bystanders get hurt a lot. Mm-hmm. We had a case at UCF, University of Central Florida, and I never forget this case because I met the parents and the sister, and there was this young man trying to help this young woman who was having a domestic violence situation. Now, in her case, she had filed a police report with the college campus police. They did not have the teen dating violence law. Mm. So because they were teen, they didn't live together. They live in different dorms. They didn't have a child in common. They didn't fall under the law of domestic violence. So they didn't get information about injunctions. They didn't get information about shelter. So she went to a party. Her friend was there. Ex-boyfriend comes, shoot both of them. That's the reality of it. So, yes, I will help you with information. Yes, I will encourage you to get help. Yes, I will support you, but I will not tolerate and I will not transport you if I'm going to put my life in danger. Right. Because if you're not ready to let go of the relationship and this person is violent and I get myself in that situation, we can both be killed. And I see that all the time, and I've seen it over the past 29 years. People have criticized me over that. I'm okay with it. I don't care the critics, because it is that lack of knowledge sometimes that causes us to perish. Mm-hmm. So we have to be very careful with those cases.
And I'm really glad you said that, because I have a friend who was involved in that, and it was really, I tried everything. Like, I tried to deal with him. Like, I'll be around, but I don't like him. But, he's just a difficult person to be around. Right. So eventually I had to set up a boundary. Like, I love you, but I only want to hang out with you. That's I don't really want him around me.
That's right.
He caused a lot of drama with my friends. Like, just their problems became my problems.
Not good.
And so I created that boundary, but she started just having him pop up anyway. So then I was like, okay, I see what you're doing. Like, I don't know who's doing it, but I see what's happening because I don't see this man any other time.
Right.
And eventually I had to tell her, again, I cannot do this.
Right.
We need to just hang out, just us. It doesn't have to be he doesn't have to come all the time. Yeah. And eventually she just dropped it and we never talked again. But she tried to keep making it like it was more me being the problem. And
but that's
not
okay.
Trying.
I need you to be the problem if it has to do with safety. Yeah. All day, every day. I've told a survivor not to come to the Brides March because she was in the middle of an active situation. And it was very painful for me to do that because we do it at the college setting in Miami. We have the College Brides March in Miami. And I had to tell her that, please don't come. I don't want a tragedy at the event. So we have to be very cautious and we have to be responsible as survivors, as bystanders, as advocates, as mental health therapists. We have to make sure that we protect ourselves and protect our team, whoever is around us. That's just wisdom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, here is another question. What changes do you essentially want to see in the criminal justice system, to provide sort of this a healthier environment for a lot of people who are dealing with these situations?
So we had a judges panel on Saturday, and I thought it was very informative of how they are so willing to use new initiatives. I know in South Florida, we have had a case for a very long time. I started that program with a few of my colleagues, and what we do is we go to the crime scene. Once the defendant has been secured, a paralegal / victim advocate will come to the crime scene, take the pictures, collect the evidence, take the sworn statement from the police and from the survivors, and file it. There's no discussion. The judge was saying on Saturday, well, it's not the victim's choice. Yeah, it's not the victim's choice, but without her statement and without the injuries, we can't prosecute. Let's be honest. Mm-hmm. Okay? And that's why the prosecution is so low. You can see that they arrest 100 people, but only 3 get an intervention. The rest are no pros. They're not prosecuted, right? So we need to become a little bit more aggressive. And I'm not saying aggressive to give somebody a background or put him in jail. To give an intervention, we need to be able to make an assessment of what is happening in that family, right? And then provide an intervention. Is it mental health issues? Is it that they're not taking their medication? Because a lot of moms do that. Somebody gets arrested in the house. Oh, no, I don't want to prosecute. Well, guess what? He's still undiagnosed. And one day he's going to come. We had a situation like that. We call it the Thanksgiving Massacre in Florida, where the guy had a mental health issue. Grandma and grandpa wanted him at the dinner. He came to the dinner, killed his sister, killed his sister's daughter, killed somebody else. Horrendous case, a bloodbath. We call it the Thanksgiving Day Massacre. Why? Because, again, we don't want to own what's happening. As a family, we want these commercials. I was going to say Publix commercial, but you guys don't have that supermarket here. But it's, these heartfelt commercials about, it's this holiday season. Let's all be together. No. Let's make an assessment. Let's make a danger assessment. So I want the system to be set up in a way that they can be more interested in providing interventions that are adequate for the degree, right? So it's like if we go to a hospital, if we have an infection, they might send us home with antibiotic. Mm-hmm. But if they see that we have cancer cells, they're going to give us chemotherapy.
Exactly.
You don't give everybody antibiotic. Yeah. In the criminal justice system, we're giving everybody antibiotic. Mm-hmm. Batter's intervention program. Okay, well, that happened 30 years ago, and we still see and hear that they're upset because they have to pay, and they're upset because they have to go at 26 weeks. And most of the times they come home and whoever is the victim gets hurt 26 times. We've heard that over the decades. So why is it that we're not coming up with more innovative ideas? I mean, for crying out loud, we have podcasts, we have YouTube, we have... What I really want to see is a victim impact panel. Okay, survivors panel, where these abusers can hear from survivors how their crime has transformed lives. In other words, get to their mind, but get to their heart first, because these people have a heart and they are repeating a behavior that they learn and they can unlearn it. But we're not using the tools to help them unlearn that behavior. We are telling them, you're a controller, you want to be in power, you want to control her time, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, okay, but where is that coming from? Why am I a controller? Why do I want to have power? Well, probably because you were neglected. Probably because you had disorganized attachment because your mom wasn't there and she probably went to be with a lover and left you in the apartment alone. There's a myriad of things why you may be abusive and controlling. But if I don't help you unpack that, and what I do for 26 weeks is tell you, stop beating people, stop trying to control them, and I don't help you understand where the behavior is coming from, we are failing you. But not only am I failing you, I'm failing the community, because if you look at the mass shootings, every single mass shooter here in America that I've studied has had a domestic violence history in his life. Every serial killer and serial rapist, when you look at the pre-sentence investigation or you read a book about them, there's child abuse, child neglect. And that's why those crimes as children is very, very critical, because that's when we attach to our caregiver. And when we have an avoidant attachment, disorganized attachment, anything other than a secure attachment, we become controlling, we become jealous, we become insecure, and we act out all of that insecurity and that jealousy and that loss of control on society, whether we know you or not. That's, we want to hurt people because we're hurting.
And we've heard it all the time. I've only had, like I said, my background is in like theater and film. So like I said, that's where my mindset usually comes from. And the one time I had a psychology course, the first thing, like the first week they said, hurt people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately that is the case.
But heal people.
There you go.
That one I didn't hear until I went to treatment. I had not heard that part.
Yeah, I've never heard that one.
I heard hurt people, but my therapist says, yeah, Josie, but heal people. I'm like, that's what's up.
There you go.
I started snapping. I'm like, you know what? Yeah.
And like I said, moving, and I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't get. Okay, you watch SVU like everybody else, and everybody has this mindset, if something like that happens, they go and they take care of the person and it's done. And that is not the case. Obviously from a actual criminal justice person, it's very rare that things like that actually get solved in the 45 minutes that they give us every.
Takes more than an episode, yes.
Yeah. So now and like I said, I know we're moving towards the end. The holiday season is coming up. And there are going to be people that you may not want to deal with, that you may have to. What would the advice be for people who are visiting family that they may have gone no contact with, that they feel like they're unsafe, that may feel like they're unsafe with, but you're in sort of a position where, hey, I can't sort of get out of this. What would you tell them?
So that one is a little bit more comprehensive for me because I have to do it, right? So that for me is, I need to have alcohol pads or oil essence that I can use when I'm around those unsafe people. If I'm making an exception and I said, well, Mom, okay, I'm going to go to your house. My mom's still alive. I'm going to go to your house for dinner, and I know your boyfriend is there. It's not the same one that abused me, but still I have a lot of reservations with her choices. So I will say, Mommy, I'm coming for an hour, and then after that I have to go. But I have my emergency bag. I have my anti-anxiety medication, which I take very proud. I have no shame in saying I take my anti-anxiety medication because my emotions get dysregulated when I don't feel safe. And if I have a loved one saying, oh, you're overreacting, oh, and people are having drinks and now I feel like I'm not being heard, guess what? It's not their problem. It's mine. Because I'm going to have to get in my car and ride, and I may not be emotionally stable enough to do that, especially during the holiday season. So I think taking control of ourselves, giving ourselves permission to say no is huge. Setting boundaries and telling family members, this is as much as I can give you. Yes, I'm going to be in town for the holidays, but I cannot meet with you. I cannot meet with my mom for more than 2 hours at a time. I may go to another country to visit her, but 2 hours at a time is the most that I can emotionally give her on a daily basis. So we know we have 2 hours. We might want to break it with a 4-hour break and then meet for dinner. Maybe I can manage that. If the previous 2 hours were good, if the previous 2 hours were bad, forget it. We're done for the day. And we laugh about it. We've had family therapy and she understands. So for me, what I smell is important to snap me out of my panic attacks when I'm in public. I have my medication. Sometimes it's just brown noise in my ears so that I can de-escalate. If I'm around a lot of people and my family is acting silly, I will put the brown noise and just walk outside. Unfortunately, I still smoke. I smoke cigarettes, so I still do that if I have to go outside and smoke. But, it is what I have done for myself. Other people can do other stuff. Usually I will never recommend illegal substances that can alter more than the nicotine, because that becomes a problem. Trauma and substance abuse is a huge problem. And that's something that you really have to consult with your doctor and make sure that you are not putting yourself in a situation where you can OD or hurt other people or become psychotic. Because it happens, I've seen it, and it can be very dangerous.
Absolutely. First off, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Are you good? You good? Okie dokie. Thank you so very much for sharing your story. And where can they find more information with you about you, about the Bride's Barge? Where can they find more information?
So I do have a practice that is myself, josieashton.com, and that's Josie, Josie, Ashton, ASHTON.com. That's for my practice for trauma resolution and to help you create kind of like a blueprint for your own healing. Because people oftentimes don't know that they can use their insurance or their parents' insurance to get the help that they need. And then for the Bride's March and my journey between Atlanta and Los Angeles, you can go to Healing His Bride, healing like healing, his and bride.com. And that is my activism page, and where I'm not blogging, but you can see my journey through there and why I'm doing all of this.
Awesome. Thank you so very much.
You're very welcome.
And of course, you can go ahead and find us at, please tell us where our social medias are.
Instagram and Facebook, CRJ_DU.
I'm still new. Please don't judge me, guys.
Welcome.
But until next time, we thank you so much for listening to us. I am Lawrence Weber, and I'm Lawrence Weber, the project assistant. I keep on forgetting. Again, I am new. I'm Lawrence Weber, the project assistant, and
I'm Tia Suggs, project coordinator.
And we will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us.